This episode is brought to you by Rescue Intelitech, innovating solutions to keep firefighters safe. Their Solo Rescue Decon Washer helps reduce cancer risks by cleaning contaminated gear quickly and effectively. Learn more at rescueintelitech.com because clean gear saves lives. Hi, Chris Mc Loone here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this episode of Talking Trucks. As always, my guest today is Ricky Riley, and we are going to be talking today about NFPA 1900 and some of those requirements. And one particular requirement we're just going to sort of posit over, whether or not this particular requirement should be changed. And that is I call it like the 15/25 rule. Take a rig out of frontline service at 15 years, and retire it from service completely at 25. And I've just been thinking recently about whether or not that should be changed. If you caught my commentary at the end of November, I touched on it, and I said I was going to be getting in touch with Ricky about this. So I kept my word on that one. So anyway, Ricky, what got me thinking about this was actually the reliability of cars today. My kids, except for one, I don't think has ever had a problem starting one of our vehicles, and it was because it was on the oldest one that we have. It's a 25-year-old pickup truck that the fuel pump just it went on it, and he couldn't get it started. I thought it was a battery because it was acting like it, but I think in trying to get it started, he ran the battery down so far that it was getting, that it was doing the clicking routine. So I was like, oh, okay, obviously this is a battery. And so I got a new battery, and it was not the battery. It ended up being the fuel pump. Shows my diagnostic skills. But he's the only one out of my three boys. He's the only one who's ever had a problem starting a car. These days you get into a car, you start it, you expect it to start. You turn the key, you expect it to start. Not only that, but I also started to think back, like the first car that I had, and it wasn't really mine. It was still my dad's car. I was just allowed to use it because I was commuting to college. It was a 78 Aspen, slant six. I'm told they run forever, so probably somewhere there's the Aspen is still driving around somewhere. No pickup, but they run forever. That's what they used to tell me. But it had a carburetor, and I would, routinely, I was never real good with it, and I'd flood it, trying to do a cold start in the morning, have to get out, spray starter fluid into the carburetor, hope it would start. Most of the time it did. But, that was just kind of the reality. And, the different shows that I've watched over the years, they all say the carburetor was a horrible design, once they came up with fuel injectors, that really did change everything. Along with that, though, my dad never bought a new car. Still to this day has never bought a new car, and only recently started going to dealers to buy a car. So back in the day, the Aspen, let's take that one for example. He would look at it. He bought that car probably in 1989. I started driving it in 1991. It was the like your typical, grandpa car, hardly ever driven, garage kept. I forget how many miles it had on. Let's just say 40. When he would do that, he would say, okay, if I'm going to spend this many dollars on this car with this number of miles, I expect to get X amount of miles out of it. And as soon as he would hit that miles, anything he got over it was gravy. If it was starting to go, he would move on to the next one. But I don't think he ran many of them over 100,000 miles. Today, a lot of cars. Now, I'm not saying it's not right or wrong. Some people don't keep their cars very long, but there are a lot of people, at least myself included, that keep their cars for a long time. And so reaching 100,000 miles today, like when he used to go looking for those cars, you didn't want high mileage cars back then. Today, 100,000 miles is kind of young, depending on the make and model. So this got me thinking about reliability. It got me thinking about NFPA 1900. Like when you look at rigs today, they are more reliable than rigs that were around 30 years ago. Mostly, like you can talk about, manual valves versus electronic and their reliability, but even those electronic valves have come a long way since they were first introduced. But in general, I would say, like they're not built to die in 15 years. They're not built to die in 25 years. And I think it's proven that they can last longer because there's an awful lot of fire departments that can't, even 10 years ago, couldn't afford to buy a new one, and they've had to keep them in service longer. I think about, before diesel engines were prevalent. There were a lot of breakdowns at the scene of different trucks. Like, just in talking to people in my fire company from back in the day, they used to break down a lot. Especially like for any kind of large diameter, not really large diameter, any kind of long stretch for supply line. Probably back then it was 2.5 or 3. Routinely, these things, they you would they would break down on the scene, and then you had to take it out, and then that was one of the reasons everybody loved the 4-way valves in the beginning, was because you could easily take a truck out and put another one in the middle of a relay or whatever. This is anecdotal, just based on things that I've heard over the years. You may be sitting there going, "No, you got it completely wrong, Chris." So correct me if I am wrong. But anyway, so I just started to think about it, and when you sort of put that, and I'm not going after anybody. I'm not going after any of the manufacturers. I'm not going after NFPA. But when you put that in the context of where we are right now today, um, you know, a the costs have gotten to a point where no matter what, there are going to be departments out there that are going to have a tremendous amount of difficulty, stock or not, buying a new buying a new truck. Um, and it seems to me that it's got to be a worse feeling if they're looking at it going, well, this one's 25 years. I've got to get rid of this. This is what I'm being told to do. And so now you're facing technically being not compliant with what really for many places is a de facto standard. Now, I understand, NFPA 1900, and I'm sorry, I will let Ricky talk soon. Um, NFPA 1900, and most of what NFPA does, if not all of it, is trying to keep firefighters safe. The things that they come up with there are in the interest of safety. Um, but I'm just wondering, is it time, not only because of where we are right now in terms of costs, but also in terms of how far we've come with the reliability of trucks and things like that? Is it time for maybe the NFPA to rethink that 15 and 25 rule? So, Ricky, I'm curious about how you feel about that. Um, Now, and I'm sorry, I will let you talk, but there's just the other aspect of this is, I can say yes, the fire apparatus costs have increased quite a bit. However, there is an onus on fire departments to plan properly, you know. But then, even if they do plan properly, a department like yours that has a replacement cycle, and like, whether or not they change that 15 and 25 is not going to change your replacement cycle. Your replacement cycle is based on your specific municipality. And so, we always go back to that. Unfortunately, it depends. That could be like the answer to almost every question asked. But but there is an onus on fire departments to plan properly, to plan now, to the extent that they can. I mean, there's only so many chicken barbecues or pancake breakfasts that you can have that are going to contribute to the overall cost of purchase cost of a truck. So you do have to, but you do have to sort of figure out some other things, and unfortunately, the funding isn't always available. So anyway, I guess basically just to start us off, and I don't have any other real questions planned. I just wanted to talk about whether or not NFPA should reconsider that 15 and 25, even if it's only 2030. Like, is it time to, just given everything that's going on, the good things, reliability, the not so great things, the cost and the lead times, is it time to rethink that? What do you think?
Am I on?
Yeah, yes,
Hello?
finally.
It's all good. I mean, the blue book is the blue book, man. It is but I had this question the other day with our with some friends that I helped out with their podcast on. They were kind of like asking the same question. And, once again, it's not in the standard. It's in the annex. So, we're not really, if it was in the standard itself, I think we'd have a little bit more teeth to it. I think the annexes are, here's some extra information, here's some charts, some graphs, whatever you need, for to support the NFPA document. And here's some stuff about your fire trucks that, you know, that it should be 15 years frontline service, then then take it into reserve status, and then at 25 years getting rid of it. So that's really great. I think that's where all of us who had replacement plans, we were all shooting for, is that, this is a good standard. And I think it's based more on, or for us, it's based on safety, and then it's also based on how available the parts are for that particular rig. So, we're not going to get, Hall Scott engine parts anymore, gasoline motor parts, because you just can't get them. Or, even a Series 60 is how we're having problems getting parts for. So that's puts you in that age of 15 to 20 to 25-year-old rigs, and you just can't get the parts for them. And safety, I think, is probably the biggest component. I mean, we were looking at rigs in my own organization where we still had lap belts. Considering the first career fire truck I rode was owned by a volunteer corporation in Fairfax County, and was made by Dick Young. It was a Young fire apparatus, and it had no seat belts in the back. So the people riding in the buckets had no seat belts. So then we get lap belts, and then now we've proven how important 3-point seat belts are. And then what about airbags? What about rollover protection? What about making sure somebody's butt's in the seat? So all those kind of pieces kind of go into that. And can you retrofit your apparatus for that? Yeah, absolutely you can. But what is the cost to do all that? And obviously they're going to tell you that, between that 15 and that 25 year is when you should start be doing your upgrades to the apparatus. Now, for any organization, I think regardless, I don't think if you're the FDNY, the LA City, the Houstons, the Detroits, is that, yeah, we kind of got to throw that out the window, because one is that, yeah, the cost is expensive, and yeah, we have great replacement plans. I had a fabulous replacement plan till COVID hit. We knew exactly where we were going to be, and then we knew, our chosen manufacturer had every year this was what their price increase was. Or they would tell you months ahead of time, hey, this is going to be our price increase for this calendar year or that calendar year. So then you're able to calculate that into your replacement plan. Now, you never know when that price increase is going to hit, or what tariff's going to hit. Or I had a fleet manager tell me that, oh, we probably should put in 30% inflation for the fire truck. I said, I would quit buying fire trucks at that point. I just don't know what the, 9% or 12% during COVID crushed us. And those haven't gone down. No manufacturer said, yeah, we really needed 9, not 12. And now, hey, now we're going to go up a little bit more and a little bit more. So yeah, we can't get as many fire trucks for our budget, but at the same point, we can't get them delivered either. So now we're taking these 15-year-old fire trucks that may have been the replacement plan to get replaced, and then now we're extending them out to 19-year or 20-year. And why are we going to invest money into that rig to upgrade safety features, do anything to make it compliant with NFPA, when, hey, we know in 4 years another one's going to be here? So it's definitely a double-edged sword, and it's very confusing to where, I wanted to get rid of fire trucks that were old, or were certified antiques. So at 25 years in our state, you can get an antique plate. So some of our rigs could have antique license plates, but we're still running them front line because we can't buy as many fire trucks, and we can't get the fire trucks delivered. So that causes a problem, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to hear, oh, we got rid of all our old fire trucks, and then we don't have any reserves, or we can't put a rig in service, or something breaks down and we don't have stuff to put in its place. So yeah, I think most municipalities, even the larger ones, are keeping rigs for longer. And can't speak for every government or every city that's saying, yeah, we're only doing minimal NFPA upgrades, or or anything like that. So it's a very troubling times, especially when you have something, a document like, NFPA telling you, hey, 15 to 25 year. I mean, I was on a call today with a lawyer about something totally unrelated, about an operational thing, and listening to that person just, grip onto the words that were in NFPA, and knowing that they weren't practical for what's going on in today's world. I mean, this document was written, in the mid of COVID, and we really didn't understand what was going to happen to us during that time, and what is still happening to us today. So, how much all that stuff is going to cost us. Even though I think NFPA 1900 certainly put a lot of it back in to the AHJ's hands,
Mhm.
kind of to make those decisions. So it's a slippery slope. So
Is that going to mess you guys up just when you
oh yeah,
like, yeah, so like, because now, so you've got frontline rigs that'll be, you'll have to replace going down the line your reserve fleet sooner than you normally would have because those frontline rigs stayed in service longer. Is is that accurate or no?
the front right now. I mean, the reserve rigs are the reserve rigs. So I mean, what we can get is what's important. So I mean, how many can
Well,
we put
you'll
out
have
of
to
service?
replace. You'll have to replace. What am I trying to say here? It's going to screw you guys up in terms of the frequency because
Yeah,
so then you'll have so you'll replace all the frontline stuff. You'll replace it right now, but if they're all 19 years old, then you're going to have to get rid of them sooner than you normally would have. So yeah, so that if I mean this is just your replacement cycle, but so that I go back to that again. I get if they're just recommended numbers and they're just recommended numbers, but there are departments out there that have 30-year-old rigs that they have no choice but to
yeah,
keep them,
I agree.
you
Yep,
know.
they do.
So yeah, so I mean, I like, but given the fact that if they're well maintained, they're likely still the chassis. I'm talking about like the chassis and the motor and stuff like that. I don't know, pumps. I don't know. The 35 years, they might be beyond help, but but I mean, if you maintain them, they should be fine. Um, but the drive line and all that, if that's well maintained, even at 30 years, the safety factor should still be there. Now, will it? I mean, we're not talking about the lap belt situation now, but if there are other safety requirements in later, in later versions, yes, I can see that. But I mean, like, mechanically, if they've been well maintained, they should still be good. It's not like you're going to expect that, well, the brake system is 30 years old and it's going to go. If it's been well maintained over the years and components of it have been replaced when they need to be, we should be good. So shouldn't it be so like should that number be changed? Since we're just at a point now where, the stuff lasts longer. I mean, or is it all just the safety requirements that, like, look, after 15 years, there's probably been a ton of safety stuff added, and you should meet that standard, not, not I don't know. I guess I'm rambling a little bit there,
No, it's
but
okay. I mean, but I mean, just go. I mean, here's one example is that we have an older fire truck in the fleet, whose ever fleet it is. It could
mhm.
be Weldon's fleet, it could be my fleet, it could be New York City's fleet, it could be LA's fleet that has drum brakes. And then we have a firefighter that all he's driven is disc brakes, and then goes and gets in a drum brake fire truck and doesn't understand brake fade, doesn't understand how that vehicle is going to operate. So I mean, that's a safety issue, for sure. But it's out with the bathwater, man. It is. Nobody can throw rigs away anymore. I don't think anybody can afford to do that, especially with fleets. Um, and the replacement plans are, it's all starting earlier now. That's what I think we've all kind of learned. But that's really great for Weldon, for a volunteer fire department to go, hey, look, we need to replace this rig in 5 years. Let's order it today. As long as you have the funding to do that. If you don't have the funding to do that, then you're really going to be in a tight spot when it comes up for replacement. Like, I know there's a lot of municipalities and governments around here that go, at 15 years, the county government's going to give the volunteer corporation some money to replace the fire truck. Well, I really need that at 10-year rather than 15-year, because it's going to take me that long to get it delivered. And changing that mindset. Maybe it's changing county ordinance, changing county law, or whatever it is, to how you get your funding to get that even earlier. And certainly it's got to be hurting the big fleets by us not being able to purchase as many rigs that we used to be able to purchase with the same amount of money. So the trickle down effect is going to be tremendous, I think, in the next couple of years, if not the next decade, of this hiccup we've had in our apparatus industry, if they don't get it straightened out. And it's not up to me, it's not up to you to straighten it out. It's up to the manufacturers to straighten it out. And if they can't straighten it out soon enough, we're all fleets are going to be hurting, regardless if you're a one or two engine department, or you've got 900 rigs or 1,000 rigs or 3,000 rigs. It's going to affect, and that just means that we're going to spend more money fixing older rigs, rather than buying new rigs. So I mean, in my fleet, we've started to ask for more money just for repairs, because we're having to keep stuff longer than we anticipated. So,
do they like I've been talking to you about the reliability of these things right now, and the reason that I took that we finally said okay, enough with this 25-year-old truck is just that the inspection's done at the end of December. I just recently did some work on it. That fuel pump thing was within the last year. And it was going to take a bit to get it to pass inspection. We finally just said, you know what, this is a 25-year-old car, or truck. It's got 198,000 miles on it. Enough. We're done. You gotta know when when enough is enough. But the thing still runs really great. Everything else is fine. It's just it's just taking more. But on the fire truck side, is there a is there a point where you would know for your own department. So maybe in the end, I'm going to be turned around and it's like, okay, 15 is what it is. Because again, I'm always thinking about the mechanical end of it. I wasn't thinking in terms necessarily of the safety side that you brought up. But is there a point just in general where trucks are like, what are the things that really start to impact the fleet, where you're saying we need extra money because I know this is coming. I know I'm going to have to do this more frequently. I know that every fleet knows that this particular nut falls off all the time, and we got to keep 9,000 of them in stock because we have to put them back on. But what are the other things that start to really, really, I don't want to say break down, but really, really start to come in more frequently? What are the problems that they come in more frequently the older they get?
I think one is that our state has a requirement that the apparatus gets inspected every year. So the state has an inspection program, and every piece of apparatus has to go through that inspection program every year. So, and that's done by a third party. So it's not us. We're not on, where I think there would probably be a little bit of, fudging's probably the bad word. A little less stringent on looking at it, rather than a third party looking at it going, hey, look, there's a problem here, there's a problem there, this needs to be replaced. And then they're going to document that. And then I'm going to have to live with that report. So it's always there. It's in the internet world somewhere. It's out in the interwebs, and it could come back and haunt you if you don't get that kind of stuff fixed. So kind of like the same thing with like ladder testing, is that they have all these different levels, like a class 1, a class 2 repair, a class 3 repair. And if you got to get all those repaired to get your certificate. But class 1s will get you to the next day, like the most, is the highest safety ones. Your class 2s and class 3s, you can get those when you get to them, and the AHJ can sign off on those. But once again, it's the same thing here. Is that we do a state inspection. They write down the stuff that's wrong with it, and then we got to decide what we're going to fix. I think as the trucks get older, for us, usually the failure that finally puts it out to pasture is usually the frame rail or the cross members. That's the big port. Is that we had a rig here recently that um, the pump had been leaking forever and never reported. I mean, look, this had to go over for months and months and months of years to rust out a frame rail. But that pump leak, rusts out the frame rail, and you're like, how much is it going to cost to replace frame rails? And we were getting astronomical numbers, three and four and $500,000 to replace the frame rails. So imagine, just think about all the stuff that comes with that. I mean, the body's got to come off, everything's got to get unbolted. You got to get the right frame, you got to get the frame rail put in, and then you got to drill all the holes in the frame rail to put all the components back on. So yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money. But big things. There's one, the frame rails, the cross members, the air system is another big one. The frailty of the lines, the frailty of the tanks, which is easy to replace. It just takes time to do it. And how much money are you willing to put into that rig, and how much longer does it have to last? So if I go, hey, I ordered its replacement, it's going to be here in 4 years. How much money am I going to put into it in the next 4 to 5 years to get it to where it needs to be? Or do I go, all right, man, we're just going to have to pull the plug because it's not fiscally responsible to do that to the taxpayers or the government or the county agencies to go, hey, we're going to dump thousands upon thousands of dollars, hours upon hours of mechanical stuff into it. And then we know we're going to get rid of it in 2 years. Is it really worth it? So you kind of weigh that on how you do that. And I'm sure that's every fleet manager across the country, even in, the smaller fire departments is, as we deal with those older rigs, how much money do we really want to put in it? Is it replacement on order? Is it slated to be replaced? What year is that going to happen? And then how long is it going to take to get delivered? So all kinds of things you got to think about when you go through with. But, having a state inspection every year or getting a DOT inspection, if your state doesn't require one, get it done and get it done by somebody outside the agency to go back and look at it. And look, I'm sure there's a lot of agencies, a lot of fleets that have their own internal inspection process. But to get that certificate, to get that document, I think that's crucial to go in the file. And then, as we get stuff fixed, we'll, as the AHJ, we'll sign off on it. Hey, we're not, if the facility doing the inspection is also doing the repair, I bet you the amount of things on the DOT report go up because, that's just more money in their pocket. And that's no hit against anybody or any shop, but it's up to us to what we're going to decide we're going to fix and repair and how much money we're going to put into that rig depending on its age.
Well, I think I've been turned around a bit on this. I was really sitting there thinking. I mean, I felt like my approach was logical, but really, just based on everything I just learned from you, it sounds like that 15 and 25 is appropriate and is certainly something to plan around and doesn't need to be rethought. I think the more critical thing is just to remember that. And this gets a little hairy sometimes too, but that 15 and 25 is in the annex. It is not a requirement of the standard. So like you said, it is in the AHJ's hand, but that does put quite an onus on that AHJ to ensure that the rig is kept up to date, that the rig is kept under kept in good working condition, so that not only are the firefighters riding it safe, but also that it will perform what it's supposed to do when it gets to the scene. And we've also had another discussion recently for those who get the print edition. It's going to be in the January edition about usage versus replacement. So that comes into it too, I mean, and we touched on that in the beginning where, your replacement cycle because of, the usage that your rigs get. And, what you need to do to keep everything flowing. There are a lot of departments out there that are keeping trucks for too long, that should have been replaced. But again, what does what is the reasoning behind it? Is it because of current conditions, or even 20 years ago were you keeping them for that period of time? So
Yeah, I
it
mean,
is certain.
we don't even use 15 years, so we have a 6-year frontline service
Mm,
criteria, and that's just based on mileage. So, if, as a paramedic engine in
mm,
anybody's fleet,
mm,
that is going out on every service call, every lift assist, every fire alarm, every structure fire, every car fire, and then we're going to go on every heart attack, chest pains, unconscious. So those numbers start to build up. Um, I've literally told my bosses that, hey, look, the day that we put a new paramedic engine in service, how based on today's apparatus delivery times, we need to be ordering its replacement that day, to get 4 to 5 years, because the mileage on paramedic engines is through the roof, just on how they have to traverse cities, communities, sometimes have to pick the paramedic up at the hospital, so that that keeps them running back and forth to hospitals, along with catching runs all the way back and forth. So um, we put in our plan, hey, at 6 years, it needs to go into the reserve fleet. And that is our wish list, for a lack of a better term, because we don't get enough money to buy everything that we need to replace the fleet. I can go look at this magical spreadsheet that I have that tells me exactly um, how many pieces of apparatus are over our criteria on any given day. So, when we go to county government to ask for those funds, that, hey, look, we have this many rigs over the replacement. We need to get these many replaced, and we have to have this number in reserve. But as we get, that's for a bigger fleet. Even for you guys in Weldon, is that you got to decide what it is. When do we need to replace it? When are we going to order it? How much it's going to cost, and how long are we going to keep the other one? And then, heck, with the way that you get money now for selling a used fire truck, goodness gracious, you're going to get a good chunk of your investment
mhm.
back on the new rig. So
And you got to be ready to move at that
yes,
point too. That
yes, you,
that
you
happened
better
with
have a
us the
checkbook in
last
hand.
time. The last time, all of a sudden it was like, well, we've got like, we expected it to take longer, but we had a really good offer, and it was like, all right, guess we're taking it out. We ended up borrowing a truck from the county, um, just to get us by until the next one was ready. But you got to be ready to pull the trigger. You get a good bona fide offer, and the buyer's going to want to move. They're going to want to move quick on it. So you might not have a lot of time. That's a whole other topic in and of itself. But for real though, I mean, like, and a lot of people, I know we do it. We budget, when we're coming up with the budget for the next rig. We have, like, what we expect to get for the one we have, that we can put toward that. So yeah, I mean, but I tell you, I remember I was down at the Apparatus Symposium, and I was talking to he was our captain at the time, and he was like, "Yeah, he goes, yeah, we got a buyer." It had not been up for very long. It was Muncie, Indiana, bought it, um, and they came out, they looked at it, they liked it, they were like, "Okay, we can write you a deposit right now." And all of a sudden, it's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold up,
Yeah,
we got a lot of work to do before this leaves the house."
yeah,
So
it's a hot market, that's for sure.
right now, yeah, this is probably not a bad time to be trying to sell a fire truck. Um, well, like I said, I think that I truly appreciate your perspective on this. I don't know if people who listen to the commentary are going to be like, "This guy doesn't know what he's talking about." Thank God he's talking to. Thank God he's going to talk to Ricky about this. You know,
I
um, but no, I mean, that perspective is important, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because I could sit here and wax poetic about what Weldon would do all day long. That's just my little part of the world here. But I mean, also though, I mean, I do think that it's not a bad thing to take a look at something sometimes and say, should that be rethought? And it sounds like it's still dead on. Forgetting about how long trucks can survive. It does seem like that rationale, that those numbers the NFPA has come up with, the recommendations, are pretty much still on the money for what most, for most of the fire service does. But, like we said, the AHJ can ultimately make that call. And, of course, there are certain responsibilities that come along with that. So
Well, I mean,
thank you
I
for that.
think we as fleet managers, our budget people, or even your own corporation's officers, like the corporation officers, have to be able to point to something. You got to be able to go, I have to replace it at 15 years. If the township is asking you, why do you need this money now? Is it, oh, NFPA says, you just can't go cause I want to replace it. That's not going to fly with any politician or board or commissioners or anything. You got to be able to point to something. So while it's, I don't know that those numbers are valid today based on the climate that we're in with cost and delivery. There has to be something in that annex or even in the standard itself to help us convince our purse string people that we need to get the replacement plans in place, and this is why. So,
Well, thank you again for sitting down with me to talk about all
absolutely,
that. I am going to ask right now, for those who have listened or watched, if you do have an opinion on this, or you want to chime in, or you want to go after me or go after Ricky, we're adults. We can take it. But let me know. I mean, if you have a thought or even another question, that you'd like us to talk about, let me know. I'm at chris.mcloone at clarionevents.com. And of course, all of our Talking Trucks episodes are archived at fireapparatus.com/podcast. So please go there, and you can see Talking Trucks. You can see all of our podcasts there. They're all archived at that location. We are going to be talking at our next podcast, our next Talking Trucks. We're getting good here. We're planning it out. We're planning ahead. We're going to be talking about aerials next time. We're going to be talking about
that's
mid-mount.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we'll get away from all this. But we're going to be talking about mid-mount. So please join us for our next episode, which will be on mid-mount. So again, this has been Chris McLoone along with Ricky Riley. Have a good one, everyone, and stay safe. Thanks again, Ricky.
No problem, Chris. Thank you.